Alright, so hopefully I get this done in one take. We'll see. But I noticed that in the previous videos where I just record using my phone, using like video, like I am now, because how I do it is I put it face down on the desk, so there's no video, only audio, and then I paste like pictures over it. But whenever I do that and I'm like fiddling, keeping my hands on the desk like that, you probably heard. So I'm going to try and consciously like stop that, but I actually have like note cards for this video. So if there's any like noise, like background noise, I'm just going to apologize. There's not really much I can do about that. So yeah, just getting that out of the way before I actually start the video. But so I said yesterday, I think in both videos yesterday, that I was going to record Miraculous Ladybug tonight, and I was truthful in that. That's what this video is. So I recorded earlier today, and I actually got that video uploaded. That was just Civilization, but in the evenings, I'm going to record Miraculous Ladybug. So this might go up at night. It may go up tomorrow, depending on how long like this video takes, and it takes for me to like edit the video. That all depends, but I'm definitely like going to record once a day in the afternoon, and I don't know how many videos I'm going to make. I have 4, maybe 5 videos planned, not including the implications videos, so we'll see about that. But so again, with that out of the way, this video is the season 4 and 5, yes, 5 predictions video. So before we even get into the video, there are like a few things we need to understand about the show that I've already talked about before, but I'm also going to talk during this video because they're relevant. The first thing is that they have the entire season completed before they even release episode 1. I think that's a given, so we know that pretty much, not even from episode 1, but from when they get the release dates out, that they have the whole season completed. So that's one thing we need to know. And the second thing we need to know is that because of that, the season finale is effectively like complete, or it is already, or the season finale is already done by the time we even get a single episode. So like when season 4 episode 1 is released, that means they've already completed, they're already finished, and the entire like creation of the season finale episode is done. So that's another thing we need to know. That the third thing is that what was apparent with season 2 and season 3, even season 1, there was a logical step from the beginning of the season to the end of the season for all of the seasons, and honestly that allows for a ton of filler since it's 25 episodes a season, and that may be why there's so much interaction in the show between the characters, which is honestly, it's a positive thing. But because there's a logical step from the start of the season to the season finale, like in season 1, obviously we're not counting Stoneheart, but if we count, yeah, we're not counting Stoneheart, but the start was stormy weather. The season finale introduced an apparent rival above that of Chloe, which is Lila, which is like, that's a logical step, creating problems for Marinette in opening future potential like opportunities, not necessarily for her akumatization, but just more so for like interactions with Lila in the future. And if we don't consider Stoneheart the finale, but that could also be considered like a logical step, being that you don't, for whatever reason, you don't start with you put the first episode at the end instead of the beginning, which is honestly, I'm not sure whether it's a good choice, but honestly, that doesn't really matter. Because season 2 and season 3 is where it's more apparent. Season 2, the start of the season actually was the reveal of Hawkmoth as Gabriel, and I've talked about that decision a lot in previous videos and how great of a decision it was, because it allows so much more development for Gabriel's character, since it's no longer 2 personas, the persona of Gabriel and Hawkmoth, but it's a single persona, like now that we know he's Gabriel. And then the end was Scarlet Moth, which is it's a logical step in that it's a logical upgrade of his power, like not only akumatizing one person, but every single person. And that also we knew that, or I guess it could be assumed even before going into the season, that if Gabriel was Hawkmoth, Natalie probably knew, and they did confirm that in the season finale. So, as Natalie was Catalyst and eventually became Mayora. So, there's a logical step for that. And then, obviously, all of the, basically, the events, not necessarily like the event of Scarlet Moth itself, or I guess the event of Scarlet Moth itself, not necessarily the events leading up for it, like Ladybug, Chat Noir Day, Kumatai's and Lila, not so much so that as Scarlet Moth, the villain himself, and making his, well, technically second public appearance, because in Stoneheart he made himself known. He himself wasn't there publicly, but he made his identity known, as opposed to Scarlet Moth, where he actually showed up. So, and then moving on to season 3, the first episode, again, kind of a callback to the end of season 1, where we got another Lila-based episode. She gets, well, first off, she gets akumatized again, but second off, it opens the potential for, as Lila wasn't necessarily rival to Marinette before, so much so as like, or she didn't hate Marinette more so much so than Ladybug, but that episode declared her a rival to Marinette as well as Ladybug. So that's a logical starting place for the season. And then, which also gives more potential for Lila Marinette interactions as opposed to having only Lila hate Ladybug. And then the season finale being the confrontation between, not even so much so focusing on Ladybug, Chat Noir, and Chloe's Miracle Queen themselves, but more so Hawkmoth confronting the Guardian and the Guardian giving up his role as the Guardian, which I actually predicted. I'm going to give myself credit for that. I think it was more so what I wanted, sort of the Guardian just to phase out, because he kind of didn't really have... He had an important role, but it wasn't the most important role, as he was a mentor to Ladybug and Chat Noir, but in terms of the story itself, all he ever really did was enable them to give out Miraculous to our people. I'm not sure you can hear that, but anyway. So, getting that out of the way, as now, because we've established that the entirety of the season is complete, including the season finale being complete, before even the first episodes are released, or even the release dates are posted, and that the season finale for each season is a logical step from the beginning of the season and the previous season. When looking at, and now this is actually getting to the content of the video, it's been already nearly 8 minutes, but when looking at season 4 and 5, first off, because when I did the season 3 predictions, it was more so just predictions for the season. I didn't really predict the finale for season 3. But for season 4, what I'm going to do is I split it up into, or season 4 and 5. Besides it being 2 different seasons, what I did was I split each of the seasons up into 2 parts. I split it up into the finale in what I thought the finale would be, given it would be a logical step from the beginning of the season, and then events that would take place during the season, or like development that would take place during the season. So what I did was I came up with what I thought the season 4 and 5 finale would be, and then I came up with the developments that would take place during the season to get the story to there. And then also, before I go into that, one more thing. Because season 4 and 5 is confirmed, we can logically assume that season 5 is the last season, because let's say they had plans for like season 6, 7, 8. They wouldn't confirm that. They would just say, oh, we're confirming season 4. And then you wouldn't know whether season 4 is the last one or not. But because they confirmed 2 more seasons, we can logically assume season 5 is the last season and the conclusion of the show. And one more thing based off that. I know in my previous videos I talked about splitting it up into a current timeline's season 4 prediction and a future timeline season 4 prediction. But given that I guess not even logically assuming, but given me going off of season 5 being the last season, basing my predictions off of season 5 being the last season, they don't have time to do a future timeline, or at least I don't feel they have time to do a future timeline, given that I feel that would require at least 3 seasons. It would require some development, because jumping straight to the future timeline effectively just throws the rest of the development out the window, because the time difference is just too great, and we can assume that events that happen between the present day and what the future timeline would be would simply override all the development that's already taken place. So that's one last thing out of the way before I actually get into the season 4 and 5 predictions. I'm gonna talk about the finale predictions first, and then I'll move on to what I think are logical developments that will happen during the season. But before that, just quick. All right, there. So this is where my note cards come in. So yeah, so for the season 4 finale, honestly, if because we have to assume a logical step that'll enable the season 5 finale. So I think the season 4 finale isn't going to be some sort of grand finale like season 2 and 3, where it was Scarlet Moth in season 2 and then Hawk Moth fighting the Guardian of the Miraculous, while Miracle Queen is with all the with the whole Miracle Box fighting Ladybug and Chat Noir. I don't think it'll be like that. I think the season 4 finale will be closer to the season finale of season 1, where it's more so character developmental, I don't even know, developmental based, as opposed to like some giant battle. Like for on the note card. So on this note card, yes, season 4 finale. Well, first off, I said it would only take one episode because the season 2 and 3 finales, considering they were big battles, they took place in 2 episodes. But the season 1 finale, like what I think this one would be, only took place in 1 episode, as it was more character and developmentally focused. That's what I was looking for. But yeah, what I think will specifically happen during the season 4 finale is, I think in the finale, which could be episode 25, depends on whether they go the full 25. But I think it will be I honestly think it will be Natalie discovering Adrian as Chat Noir. I think that is the next logical step they can take, given what we have so far. Assuming they introduce nothing new, especially with the whole freaking Order of the Miraculous being back now. I'm not even going to talk about that. Actually, I'm going to talk about that later during my season 5 predictions, but in terms of if nothing new is introduced, I think the next logical step would be Natalie discovering Adrian as Chat Noir. Now, from there, I mean, obviously, what if Natalie discovers it and then immediately tells Gabriel, then Ladybug and Chat Noir lose. I mean, we've seen that in Shot Blanc. So I think if she does discover he is Chat Noir, either the main thing is she has to decide whether to tell Gabriel. That's the main thing, and that's going to be, granted, in Shot Blanc, we saw her tell Gabriel. However, that was because she was already on the phone with him. She was specifically aiding in his plan to akumatize Marinette, and that was a part of his plan. But if it's Natalie discovering that Adrian is Chat Noir just randomly or out of the blue, or just like innately, then she has time to think about whether she wants to tell Gabriel, as opposed to her just doing it because she's already in contact with him. Like, let's say Gabriel did actually leave the country for whatever reason, like he was supposed to in the Party Crasher episode, and then Natalie discovered that Adrian was Chat Noir. I guess I don't know how that would happen because someone would need to be akumatized in Paris, but if Natalie were just to innately discover Adrian as Chat Noir and not immediately be in contact with Gabriel, she would have time to think about whether she wants to tell him. Because we saw in Natalie's reflection during, I don't even remember what episode it was. I think it was Stormy Weather too. But her reflection is that she feels some sense of pity or remorse for Adrian. If she were to tell Gabriel Adrian was Chat Noir, who knows? She would certainly not know what Gabriel would do to Adrian or what he would do. Or what he would do to him. So if she has time to think about it, then it's logical to think that she could potentially not go through with telling him. Because I think if she did tell him, then there would be no way the show would be able to continue on, as Gabriel would just automatically get Chat Noir's Miraculous pretty much, or Adrian's Miraculous at that point. But if she has time to think about it, then that's what I'm saying. I think she would either tell neither of them, which I think is more likely, or both of them, which I think, I'm going to talk more about that in my Season 5 predictions, but yeah. All in all, I think the Season 4 finale it'll be a normal episode, like normal, there doesn't even have to be an akumatization, just like a normal episode, but then the big event being Natalie discovers Adrian Chatenoir. I think that's a very logical step from where we are now. And I think they could do a lot of development within 25 episodes. In fact, I have in-season predictions right there, especially given everything we've left off with in season 3. That'll give a lot of time for development on that. But yeah, now that we're done with the season 4 predictions, so just to repeat it one more time, what I think the season 4 finale will be is Natalie discovering Adrian Chatenoir, and that she ultimately will decide not to tell Gabriel, as she would be given time to do that, as opposed to what she did in Chat Blanc, where it's immediately tell him. So that's season 4. Again, sorry for the extra noise. Yeah, because apparently these videos get a shit ton more views than the rest of mine, so I need to take it a bit more seriously. But alright, so for the season 5 predictions, now this is the last season, so this is like the grand finale, the very end of the show, what I think will happen. Now, I actually don't have a lot here written, but I think I'm going to talk about a lot, so this will probably take longer. But so for the season 5 finale, like I said, how the season 4 finale would be a single episode, kind of like season 1, I don't think they can fit the season 5 finale in 2 episodes, like in season 2 and season 3. Simply because they would basically have to resolve the whole show in the finale. And there's a lot to resolve, so I think it would take 3 episodes. I think the season 5 finale would take 3 episodes, and I've actually divided them up specifically into what the episodes would be. The first episode in the finale, it would be more a developmental episode. And remember, this is at the end of season 5. So my season 4 prediction is 25 episodes from where we currently are. So starting from season 4 episode 1, 24 episodes after that. The season 5 finale, which I'm talking about right now, this is 25 episodes after that. So there's 24 episodes between the first episode of season 5 and the season 5 finale. It doesn't even have to be that much, but there's still a ton of episodes between the season 4 and season 5 finale. So I think they can end off from where I predicted the season 4 finale would be, and then wrap up the whole show in one more season. So yeah, with the season 5 finale, like I said, the first episode would be the developmental episode. And what I said would happen for this, because I'm going to do my predictions based off each of these episodes. For the season 5 finale, given that's 3 episodes and the first one's developmental episode, it would be, what I said was 2 things. 1, Adrian and Gabriel would ultimately figure out each other's identity. I go into the event that would allow this to happen during my actual in-season predictions, but I think that would be the first thing that needs to happen, because that would be sort of basically, I guess because I was going to say, with the season 4 finale, if Natalie figures out Adrian's identity, that's not necessarily, like, detrimental in that it forces the characters or it forces basically an end to the show. Granted, I do think that it'll allow for I do think that's what the best logical step would be from the end of season 3, and it would also allow for some interesting development in season 5. But if Adrian and Gabriel figuring out each other's identity, that would force an end to the show effectively, as basically each of their Miraculous is pretty much in one move. They can each take each other's Miraculous, given they play their moves smart, because they know each other's identity and they are so close to each other. They would either snatch up the other's Miraculous fairly quickly somehow, no matter what it is, and that would force an end to the show, one way or another. So that's the first prediction that's what I first think will happen in the developmental episode for season 5 finale. Adrian and Gabriel will figure out each other's identity. Granted, they would be separated when this happens, and I'm going into more detail when I give my in-season predictions for season 5. But yeah, the second part of the developmental episode is I think Marinette and Adrian will also figure out each other's identities. Because that would be sort of, granted, it won't necessarily be like, I don't think it'll be like Chat Blanc, where it was one figuring out the other and then the other figuring out because of something the first person subsequently did. I think it'll be them on a mutual plane. They'll both figure out each other's identity at the same time. They will be with each other when it happens, whether it's accidental or on purpose. I think that would also be something that would force an end to the show, because if Gabriel gets access, if Gabriel knows Adrian Chat Noir, and then he gets access to Adrian, who also knows Marinette is Ladybug, that would basically force an end to the show. Only through a developmental episode like that could they force an end to the show, because then the Miraculous would be too vulnerable. They'd be too up for grabs from each other as they know each other's identity. So yes, those are the so for the season 5 finale, given it's 3 episodes and the first is a developmental episode, what I think will happen during that is Adrian and Gabriel will figure out each other's identity, and Marinette and Adrian will figure out each other's identity. I think that's what logical development needs to take place in order to force an end to the show like that. All right, so the second, now this is where it's going to get interesting. All of this before is kind of random bullshit like blabbering, but for the second, this is going to be interesting. So the second episode will be a battle episode. This is where it will be like the second episode of Scarlet Moth, the second episode of the season 2 finale, the second episode of the season 3 finale. But obviously, there's going to be one more episode after this, because that'll be resolution. I'm just going to say it out. Just say it in front, because they would need to resolve everything else. So, the season 2, or the second episode of the season 3 finale, given it's 3 episodes, would be what I think is, it would be a battle episode. They would have to end the show on some big battle. Like, otherwise, it would just be mainly disappointing. And what I think this battle would be is, it would be Gabriel as Scarlet Moth and Mayora. Now, what this means is I think he'll have the butterfly and the peacock Miraculous. He'll be wearing both of them. So, as Scarlet Moth, what he'll do is he will akumatize everyone and give them a sentient monster through both his power as Hawkmoth and Mayora, with both the butterfly and peacock Miraculous. Now, I'll get into why I think this is during the season 5 in-season predictions. But this could actually go one of 2 ways. That's one way. And what I think is, because in order for him to become Scarlet Moth, he'll need a catalyst in order to give him that power. Now, I do not think that catalyst will be, I don't think it will end up being, what's her face, Natalie. And I'll go into my reasoning why during the season 4 and season 5 in-season predictions. But I think that will actually be Lila. And I'll also go into that in my season 4 and season 5 predictions. I think Gabriel will, or not even necessarily Gabriel, because Gabriel can confront Lila as Hawkmoth, allow her to become Catalyst, and then she can give power him up, both if he has both the Butterfly and the Peacock Miraculous, because we now know the Peacock Miraculous is fixed. That was at the very last scene of season 3. But I don't even know what his name would be, but him as Scarlet Moth and Mayora with both the powered up Butterfly and Peacock Miraculous, he would akumatize everyone and give everyone a sentient monster. Given how he would create the negative emotions, like he did during the season 2 finale by having Chat Noir pretend die, and during the season 3 by making it so that Marinette got expelled. How he would do that, I don't know. But this is specifically for season 3. Something like that would take place in the developmental episode. But yeah. And then, given it would be Gabriel, Scarlet Moth, and Mayora, it would be versus everyone. Everyone who has wielded a Miraculous, and potential new Miraculous holders, which I will also touch on in my season 4 in-season predictions. But yeah, for the season 5 finale, during the battle phase, or during the battle episode, which is the second episode, it would be Gabriel, Scarlet Moth, and Mayora versus everyone, pretty much everyone who has wielded a Miraculous before, and the new Miraculous holders, which I'll also go ahead and predict, well, during the season 4 and season predictions. But yeah, so it would be a big battle with Gabriel having to kumatize everyone and giving everyone a sentient monster versus everyone who's wielded a Miraculous, and then all the new ones. And then here's where it splits off, because that was what I think 2 things can happen for this. That was the first thing that could happen. And that is a pretty good season finale right there. Or that's a pretty good battle right there. But what I also think could happen, given we have more interaction with the future timeline and more interaction with the Miraculous Temple Order of the Guardians, what I think could happen is all the future superheroes could come back and also fight Gabriel, Scarlet Moth, and Mayora. However, obviously, they would wipe the floor with him it wouldn't be a fair fight at all. They would crush him because it would be everyone in the past as a superhero and then their future selves fighting Hawkmoth. So Hawkmoth wouldn't stand a chance. But in order to even it out, what would need to happen is, given we already know given the Temple of the Miraculous, that's why I said that if there's more development with the future timeline, in that everyone from the future would come back to fight Hawkmoth in the Order of the Miraculous, given that their temple is back. Given, like, the Temple of the Miraculous is back, if Hawkmoth manages to get his hands on a Miracle Box, I think Hawkmoth wearing every single Miraculous, excluding the Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculous, Hawkmoth wearing every single other Miraculous, being powered up from Catalyst, I think that would be a fair match versus all the superheroes, all the Miraculous wear users in the current timeline and future timeline. Because then Hawkmoth has practically infinite potential, as with all the Miraculous to begin with, as well as being powered up by Catalyst. And we know Hawkmoth has an unbreakable will, because I will talk about later in during my later videos, not related to Season 4 and Season 5, about the theme of Season 3 and what it means. And that theme is, I'll talk about them, but long story short, it's failure and resolve. And we know Gabriel's resolve is on par with Marinette's and Adrian's easily, and Marinette's resolve was what allowed her to wear all the Miraculous at once during, what episode was it? Kwame Buster. So we can assume Hawkmoth could wear every single Miraculous at once, excluding the Ladybug and Black Cat, and get powered up by Catalyst, and that he would be able to control power for a brief period of time. And I think that would be the only fair shot he has at, or that would even the playing field with, if all the future superheroes came back to fight Hawkmoth. So again, that's just talking about the battle episode. So going back, if the Season 5 finale is 3 episodes, during the battle episode, which will be a second episode, it will either be Gabriel as Scarlet Moth and Mayora being powered up as Catalyst versus all the present day Miraculous wearers and users, and the potential ones we'll see in Season 4. So even though everyone's had their identity figured out, it doesn't really matter. So they could, and what I'm talking about is everyone's identity being figured out by Hawkmoth in the Season 3 finale. That doesn't really matter. They would still get theirs, along with the potential future of, like, Season 4, people will see wearing the Miraculous. So along with present day people who potentially get a Miraculous. So it'd be all of those people versus Gabriel as Scarlet Moth and Mayora powered up by Catalyst. I think that would be a fair fight. And the second option, or the second potential way it could play out, is that if the future superheroes come back to the present in order to fight Hawkmoth, if Hawkmoth has access to a Miracle Box, which would be from the Temple of the Miraculous, and he's wearing all the Miraculous besides the Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculous, so him having all the Miraculous besides the main two being powered up by Catalyst, I think that would be a fair match between all the current superheroes, or all the present day Miraculous users, and all of their subsequent future Miraculous users. I think that would be a fair fight. Now, another quick little break. Alright, now, obviously what happens in the battle, obviously we'll know in the end Hawkmoth get defeated, but that'll be the end of the battle episode. So, yeah, given the Season 5 finale's 3 episodes, I already talked about the developmental episode earlier on and what would happen then. I just finished talking about the battle episode. The third episode would be a resolution episode, and this is where most of the, what I'm talking about now may not seem like it makes sense, but I am going to go into what predictions I think will happen in each season and how that will lead up to each subsequent season finale. So for the resolution episode, which it would be the third episode in the Season 5 finale, what I have written down is literally ships play out in character resolutions, but I think what would be more interesting is more so story-wise. So obviously, Hawkmoth would be defeated. He would be revealed as Gabriel, if not before. He would have lost, basically. It's all over for him. However, what I think would happen is that this is why Adrian needs to know Gabriel, that Gabriel is Hawkmoth, so that rather than just, execute him or throw him in jail, they would need to understand what his goals are, and then basically understand that he's not doing it because he's innately evil. He's doing it because he's a father who's mourning the loss of his wife. And that would give him a humanizing side, which ultimately would, as we saw in, well, not necessarily in season 2, but that was, ignore what I just said, but rather than punish him, Ladybug and Chat Noir and the rest of the heroes, they would need to help him, obviously. Now, one of my predictions was that, or one of my predictions, I guess I'm mentioning now, is that Natalie will be absent from the season 5 finale. In that, rather than be there, she would be practically on her deathbed. I'm going to get into why I think that is during season 4 and 5, my season 4 and 5 predictions. But that is one thing I think will happen. Natalie will end up being on her deathbed, and that would also drive sort of the end of the episode, basically Natalie nearing the end of her life. But anyway, so rather than punish Gabriel, I think all the heroes would help him in terms of bringing Natalie back to health. Obviously, it's beyond like normal human like science. It would have to be a sort of miraculous based solution. And I think only with all the present day superheroes and future superheroes could they find that solution. And ultimately, I think they would find a solution in order to bring Natalie back up to health and reverse the effects of the damaged Peacock Miraculous. I think that is what will happen. As Natalie, as we saw at the end of season 3, she was in pretty bad shape. But if it continues, we'll see at the end of season, if she even makes it to season 5. But if she's, assuming she's close, she's basically on her deathbed at the end of season 5, and assuming that Gabriel is, and assuming that Gabriel's goals are recognized by Adrian and Marinette, and that which humanizes him, and rather than him seeing evil, like I said, he's seen as a father who's mourning the loss of his wife. Rather than punish him, they'd help him, and they'd help him not by fulfilling his goals, that would require the miraculous, but they would help him by nursing Natalie back to health, or solving her ailment, or basically reversing, like I said, reversing the effects of the Peacock Miraculous. I think that's the main thing that would happen. But obviously, Ship's playing out character resolutions. Obviously, we know Adrianette is endgame. Like, that's, if they don't make that the end Ship, then I don't know what they're doing. But yeah, that's obviously Adrian and Marinette would get together. That's, I think, fairly obvious. And I think that would help with, like I said, during the development episode, Adrian and Marinette would figure out each other's identity. That's one of the things I think will happen, and that would help drive them getting together and basically their ship sailing and it happening. That's what I think would become, that's what I think is most likely. I don't see Luca or Kagami being involved in this at all. But yeah, I think obviously everyone can agree Adrianette's endgame. So that out of the way, I think Gabe Nath will happen. I think the only thing that will drive Gabriel to realize what he has in like Natalie, and the only thing that would drive him realizing his feelings for Natalie would be her dying, like I said, and that's why I think she would need to be on her deathbed practically. And then with the current heroes and future heroes reversing the effects of the damaged Peacock Miraculous, nursing her back to health, he would be, for not necessarily forever and dead to them, but he would be extremely grateful for them, and that's him losing Natalie, or going through the process of losing Natalie would cause him to realize how much he cares for her, and how much he would, I hate to say, like, loves her. And then I wouldn't necessarily how much he sees her as Emele, because I don't think him seeing that would be like stable at all. That would not really be a stable relationship, but that's what would ultimately have to happen in order to drive Gabriel to get with Natalie. And I think that's ultimately what they have in store for the end of the Gabriel, Emele, Natalie, like, sort of almost not necessarily love triangle because Emele is dead, but that sort of like conflict. It would ultimately be Gabriel getting with Natalie, as Emele can't feasibly come back without like Hawkmoth winning, which we know isn't a possibility. So yeah, those are the two ships that would play out. And I think obviously during the development episode, Adrian and Marinette figuring out each other's identity on a mutual plane would allow for their ship to sail. And then ultimately, what I seriously think the only thing that will allow the Gabe Nath ship to sail would be him grieving through Natalie pretty much dying. Basically, Natalie going through the process of losing Natalie and ultimately having her brought back and him realizing how much he cares and loves her. That was ultimately what it would take for their ship in order to sail. So those are the two ships that'll sail. And then character resolutions, I didn't really have many, there's not many other characters that need to be resolved, for example. The main one I was thinking was Lila. Given she acted as Catalyst, or given what I think will happen is she as acting as Catalyst and supporting Hawkmoth, directly supporting Hawkmoth during the season 5 finale, but also including everything else she did already and potentially in season 4 and 5 and I will talk about that a bit, during what I think will happen in season. But I think her, after everything she's done, I think she'll basically she will leave and never come back, or at least to Paris. Like, basically, she'll be, unlike Chloe, who's allowed to stay in Paris, she'll be basically given the option to leave. It's not even really an option. She'll basically be told to leave and never come back. And that's basically either that's her option, leave and never come back, or go to jail, basically, for everything she's done. Because Gabriel, he will be humanized by Adrian and Marinette knowing who he is and what he truly wants to do with his wish and how they perceive him. But Lila, there is no humanizing factor to Lila. So her actions, although not necessarily as bad as Hawkmoth's, have no redeemable answer. They have no coherent answer. They're not. She's not redeemable in any way. So that's why she'll basically leave. And then potentially, if there's a second show that revolves around the future timeline, she could potentially emerge as Hawkmoth, as Gabriel, his character arc would have concluded with him losing his title as Hawkmoth and him getting with Natalie. That could potentially allow for that. I'm not ruling it out, but I'll talk about that later if the time ever comes. But yeah, so basically Lila would leave forever. She would no longer be welcome in Paris. And then I guess the only other person I could think of is Chloe. And I mean, Chloe, obviously, I think she would basically act as how she did during the season 2, end of season 2, early season 3, as she was on the side of Ladybug and Chat Noir. She would still be herself, like herself, sort of stubborn and annoying. I think those are the best words to describe her. Bratish, I don't know. But she would also be she would be friendly with Ladybug, and as she, I guess, if she potentially learns that Ladybug's Marinette, be friendly with Marinette and the rest of the classmates as well. She may go through a character change, but she could easily stay herself, but ultimately still be one of the good guys, be allied with Ladybug, ultimately. As, like I said, everyone, all the Miraculous users, including her, would fight during the battle episode of the finale, so there's that. Yeah, I think that's really it. I can't think of any other characters. Because obviously, alright, so recap of the season 5 finale. 1, I would separate into 3 episodes. A development episode, a battle episode, and a resolution episode. During the development episode, Adrian and Gabriel would figure out each other's identity, and Marinette and Adrian would figure out their identities as well. But theirs would be on mutual as opposed to one figuring out the others. So they would each figure out each other's at the same time, and they would each know the other person knows their identity at the same time. So that would prevent any sort of Chat Blanc scenario, as it wouldn't be one knowing the art without the other knowing them type of deal. And then obviously Adrian and Gabriel figuring out their identities. These two identity revelations, they would force the show to end, as all their Miraculous would be so vulnerable and so out in the open to each other because they know their identities. There's nothing really stopping them from snatching up each other's Miraculous. So it would force the show to end. The second episode, the battle episode, this would go one of 2 ways, and I'll explain what would be the differentiating factor during the season 5 predictions. But it would go one of 2 ways. 1, it would be Gabriel as either Scarlet Moth or Mayor, so him having the Butterfly and Peacock Miraculous being powered up by Catalyst which would be Lila in this case scenario, not Natalie. Him in that state having akumatized Paris and given them all sentient monsters versus all the current Miraculous wares and potential future Miraculous wares. Not in the future timeline, but in the future of the current timeline. So, like, potential Season 4 Miraculous wares. I think that'd be a fair bout, and ultimately they'd come out on top like they did. Or, the second way it could go would be if there's more development with the future timeline and or the order of the Miraculous as it was restored, if the future superheroes come back to fight Hawkmoth as well. If Hawkmoth got a hold of a miracle box from the Temple of the Miraculous, and he wore all of the Miraculous besides the Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculous, and he was powered up by Catalyst, so him having all the minor, what I call the minor Miraculous, being powered up by Catalyst, I think that would be a fair fight. Him in that state, being able to control the power for that brief period of time as we saw, he has the resolve of Marinette, and she was able to wield all of them. But him being able to wield all of them and being powered up versus all the current Miraculous wares and themselves in the future, I think that would be a fair fight. Honestly, be a fair fight. And they would also come out on top. Now, the third episode of the Season 5 finale, which would be the resolution episode. So in this episode, ultimately the story resolution would be, obviously, if they haven't discovered already, Marinette and Adrien would discover that Hawkmoth is Gabriel. But then, as opposed to punish him, he would be humanized in that he would be seen by them as, like I said earlier, twice. He would be mainly seen as a father mourning his wife's loss and doing whatever he can in order to bring her back. That would be the humanizing factor that would drive them to help him as opposed to punish him. And granted, that helping wouldn't be bringing Melee back, but rather than that, it would be reversing, as Natalie, what I think her condition will evolve into is effectively her being on her deathbed. They will help reverse the damages. They will help reverse the effects of the damaged Peacock Miraculous and help her nurse her back to health. And that would be how they would help him, as opposed to them bringing a Melee back, because that's what I predicted earlier. But I think that's how they would help him regarding Natalie as opposed to Melee. Now, that would be how the story plays out, but how the plot and how each character plays out, the subsequent storyline would end. It would end with Gabriel. It would end with Gabriel recognizing how much he cares for Natalie and how much he has what feelings he has for her and how much he loves her. That ultimately the only thing that would drive that would be her subsequent conditioning worsening, her subsequent dying, or her subsequent deteriorate. Like Gabriel having to deal with her subsequent. I had a word for this earlier. Yeah, Gabriel would have to deal with her subsequently, like, losing her as she is dying. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. And then obviously having all the current and future superheroes help him reverse those damages and nurse her back to health. That's what would allow him to realize how much he cares for her, how much, like, all the feeling, like his feelings for her, as well as him ultimately loving her. That's what would allow that ship to sail. We already established that Natalie loves Gabriel, so that's one part of the whole done. His would be the other part, and that's what it would take to make that happen. And ultimately, that will allow the Gabe Nath ship to sail. Now, for Adrien Marinette, as what I do think they will ultimately figure out each other's identity in the development episode, but it will ultimately be on a mutual plane. Granted, what I also think needs to happen before then is they need to first off, Luca and Kagami, they need to slowly start hanging out less with Marinette and Adrien, but ultimately Marinette and Adrien, they would need to start hanging out together more, so that when ultimately they are able to reveal each other's identity and ultimately recognize the feelings that they have for each other, and ultimately that's what they would allow their ship to sail, as opposed to, like, what happened in Chat Blanc, which was what I consider to be, like, too quick and wouldn't really happen, is they need more development time in order for them to truly realize their feelings for each other. I think that's what would need to happen in order to make their ship sail, like the Adrianette ship sail, obviously. And then character resolutions excluding ships. Lila, I basically think for her having directly helped Hawkmoth, but having no humanizing factors like Gabriel does, in that she's irredeemable. She would basically be like, what would you call it? I'm not sure. There's a good word for it. I really can't think of it. But yeah, basically she would be given the option: leave Paris and never come back, or go to jail. Basically, it's basically when you get kicked out of a country. I don't even know. But yeah, she would, and then she would ultimately leave Paris and never come back. Not evicted. I don't even know. I had the word earlier, but I can't think of it yet. So she would ultimately choose that option, and then that would potentially allow for her development as the future Hawkmoth or her development as Hawkmoth in the future timeline, potentially. Because I think ultimately she will become the future Hawkmoth, but that's what could allow for her development. But yeah, I can't think of the episode. Not excommunicated, but like being like kicked out. Not evicted. I don't even know. I can't think of the word. So I'm going to ignore that. So yeah. And then Chloe's resolution being she could either stay the same as she is currently, or she was at the end of season 2 and 3, where basically she was still her normal self as Chloe. But ultimately she would fight for the good guys as Queen Bee. She could stay as that. Or she could go through a character development if she realizes Marinette is Ladybug, where she starts to slowly respect other people, especially her classmates, and then starts to basically go through character changes in order to become a nicer person. Yeah, it would be. God, I can't think of the word. There's like a. I'm gonna ignore it. All right, so that's the season. That's the season 5 finale. That's all of the season finale predictions that I'm going through. So there's that done. And taking our water break. But yeah. I'm going to be so annoyed that I can't think of that word. But yeah, so those are the finale predictions over. So I initially did the season 4 finale predictions and the season 5 finale predictions. Now, what we need to do, ignore the noises for a bit. Now, we need to go into the predictions of what will happen during this season. I think these could be, I don't think they'll be as long. Yeah, I'm still going to be, that's all I'm going to be able to think about now. Hold on, I'm going to pause it. Well, no, actually, because that would take the video longer to edit. So I'm just not going to think of it. Yeah, so anyway. So, yeah, so for the season 4 predictions in season. So these are the events that will happen in season. That these events aren't so much so supposed to lead up to the season 4 finale, as that could happen anyway at any time, like Natalie discovering Adrian's identity, which is what I predicted the season 4 finale to be. That could happen at any time, so there's no real development that needs to happen in order to like allow that event to happen, as it could happen anyway. So my season 4 predictions are more so specific events, like what I think will ultimately happen. So yeah, I'm just gonna go down the list, as I do have a list. So yeah, and then all right, so actually my first prediction isn't even related to events itself. It's how it picks off from the previous timeline. Because we know that season 2 picked off right after the end of season 1. Is it picked off right after Gabriel losing his book, or well, technically Adrian losing Gabriel's book, as season 2 picked off right after season 1 in that fashion. But season 3 picked off sometime after season 2, or it could have picked off any time after season 2, as there was no direct link. Now, so given that, we need to talk about where season 4 will pick off. So, as that will affect all the events happening after that. So, I think it's obvious to say season 4 pick off right after season 3 leaves off, as there was so much that happened at the end of season 3. That's really all I can think of happening. I think that's a logical assumption that most people would agree on. So, there's that, just where it stands in a timeline directly after the events of season 3. Now, the first thing that I predict is that Master Fu and Lenore will not come back and never come back. The reason I'm saying this is because I can see them bringing Master Fu and Lenore back, as there are other inconsistencies within the show that I'll also talk about. As season 3 ultimately, I don't think it's as good as the R seasons, but I mean, hey, that's just me. But I want to rule it out 100% that they don't come back. I could potentially see them ultimately bringing Master Fu back, as Lenore still has her memories over the Miraculous. in like the Kwamis, and she pretty much knows everything, as it was originally her and Master Fu who were had possession of the Miracle Box, but obviously, as we saw in it was Backwater, I think, that they were ultimately separated. But she still has that knowledge and those memories, so she could potentially bring him back in, whether it's to Paris or to the temple, and somehow have his memories stored, and somehow they would ultimately be brought back into the show. But I don't think that would happen. I'm just acknowledging the possibility. What I'm saying is, I don't think they'll come back. I 100% do not think they'll come back, as his character arc ended there. It ended at the season 3 finale, and it ended. It was concluded. There were no loose ends. It was a perfect ending for him and his life, and he succeeded. He had a purpose. He fulfilled what he wanted to do. So there was no reason to bring him back. Lenore, she doesn't really matter, as we just learned about her this season. But I mean, ultimately, her ending up back with him, that's however many years them being separated, that would ultimately bring an end to her character arc as well. It was a mutual love between them. So that would bring an end to her character arc and her waiting for him. So yeah, there's again, just reiterating, I 100% do not think they'll bring him back. I really hope they don't, or I'll feel stupid. So, all right, next prediction: Marinette keeps the Miracle Box. As obviously we know it's now in her possession, as she is the new guardian. Because the reason I say this is because the problem is, given now that the Order of the Miraculous is restored and the temple is restored, that throws in so many problems in predictions. Because a potential option, I have to acknowledge that a potential option is that she could end up bringing it back to the temple. I have to acknowledge that's a potential option. Even though I don't think it'll happen, it is a possibility that needs to be acknowledged. I really hope it doesn't happen. I don't think it will happen. I don't really see them doing that. Yeah, I 100% think Marinette will ultimately keep the Miracle Box. And obviously, there may be a few scenes of her having trouble dealing with it or whatever, and like her ultimately having to adapt to like keeping it on her or like in her room or whatnot. But yeah, I think she will 100% keep it. So that's the second prediction. I think this is in a better order than how I did the season 3 predictions, as that was more so just drawn about. But this is in a logical order for events taking place, or importance of events at the end of season 3, post season 3 finale. So, next, I think it's not I think, but it's more so a declaration if you're doing predictions, but it's that the old Miraculous users won't get their Miraculous back. Now, the reason for this is because Hawkmoth knows all their identities, as we saw how she was reluctant to give Chloe her Miraculous back, Kagami her Miraculous back, technically herself is Minnie Mouse or whatever, as in, I had to rewatch Coin Buster, that confused me so much. But yeah, what was it? It was Kagami, it was Chloe, was it just them? What, was it just them? I swear there was one more, but I can't remember. No, I do think it's just them. Yeah, it's just them. So, but given Hawkmoth knows them all now, I don't think they'll get the Miraculous back, at least in season 4. Like how I predicted the season 5 finale will be everyone, including them, having the Miraculous. I think for season 4 they won't get the Miraculous back. It'll allow time to focus on new Miraculous users, which I'll talk about later. But I also have to acknowledge the possibility that simply because there's so many of them, Hawkmoth can't necessarily watch over them all like he could with Chloe and Kagami, because with those he can have Mayora and himself practically directly watching over in case Ladybug tries to do something that involves giving them their Miraculous. But with him knowing everyone, he can't watch over them all. However, him having that innate knowledge will intimidate Ladybug into not giving them their Miraculous, which is, I think, is the possibility. So, but she could potentially see through that and still give their Miraculous to them, as Hawkmoth can't like feasibly watch over them all. I just have to acknowledge that as a possibility, but I really don't think it'll happen 100%. I don't think or 100%, I don't think the old Miraculous users will get their Miraculous back, or at least during season 4. Now, this one's going off of this one. It's the new Miraculous wearers. I think they will ultimately get new Kwamis. I think they'll introduce the rest of the Kwamis with these new Miraculous wearers, because that will allow them to play into, like I said, a grand finale for season 5 where everyone is wearing a Miraculous. In all the basically there won't be shared Miraculous, in that everyone who has received a Miraculous, they will be the only one who has received their type, and that ultimately they will wear it in the final battle. But yeah, so I think it'll be new Miraculous wearers and subsequently new Kamis. I don't think they'll use the old Miraculous on 4 new Miraculous wearers. I just don't really think that makes sense. Yeah, 100% don't think they'll do that. It'll be 100% new Miraculous wearers with new Kwamis. Now, granted, I think I have 6 nominees for these new Miraculous wearers, and basically it's just the rest of the students in Mrs. Boustier's class. Like, I don't really think they would give them to anyone outside of her classes. They don't really know him as much, except with the exception being Luca. But yeah, I think the Miraculous. Well, first off, the six people who don't have a Miraculous in her class, who haven't worn a Miraculous in her class, are Ivan, Malen, Julika, Rose, Nathaniel, and Sabrina. Now, I have certain levels of priorities for how I think these characters will receive them. What I think is, if what I said before is true, in that Season 4 consists entirely of new Miraculous wearers and entirely of new Kwamis, I think that ultimately Ladybug will give out 4 of them to Ivan, Milan, Julika, and Rose. Now, the reason I say those 4 is because they don't really need to introduce a shit ton of new Miraculous wearers. Just new ones whenever the opportunity arises, whenever they need to help fight Ladybug and Chat Noir, just to like refill their lines, as they lost all their old ones practically. So they don't need to go ham. They just need to temporarily give new people Miraculous to wear to help them, to aid them in their fight against Hawkmoth. But the reason why I choose these 4 is because those are the 2 other couples in the classroom. Ivan and Milan being a couple, and Julika and Rose being a couple. Now, I think if they ultimately go with 4 and they ultimately go with all new ones, there would have to be these 2 couples, because it would allow for developments, kind of like how Nino and Alia had some development as a couple, given they were both Carapace and what was her name? Rena Rouge. That allowed for their own characters to subsequently have more development. If the 2 couples, that would be 4. It sounds weird, but if these 4 people, which they're each couples, if they are given Miraculous, so it'll allow for more development of them as not just a couple, but for themselves as characters, as they're kind of side characters now, but they could be brought into the main light given the opportunity of them wearing new Miraculous and having new powers, helping Ladybug and Chat Noir fight Hawkmoth. So there's that. But that leaves the 2 others, Nathaniel and Sabrina. Now, given that the old Miraculous users do get their Miraculous back, I think these 2 will be much more likely candidates for receiving a new Miraculous, if any. Simply because it doesn't really make sense to give 4 new people theirs, as there are already so many. So having the odd ones out and the ones not being a couple, or the ones who in Miss Boustier's class haven't gotten Miraculous yet and are not in a relationship or are a couple. Like, I personally think Nathaniel is a more likely candidate. If there's one new Miraculous user in Season 4, I think it will likely be Nathaniel. Granted, this has nothing to do with how I shipped Nathaniel and Marinette and how I'm still salty he got 0 development in Season 2. Nothing to do with that. But I think more so because Sabrina has too close of ties to Chloe. In that Hawkmoth, he could potentially get to Sabrina through Chloe, as opposed to Nathaniel, who's kind of under the radar. Like, Marinette being Ladybug would acknowledge that Sabrina is way too close of ties to Chloe and could potentially reveal her identity to Chloe, which would subsequently reveal her identity to, like, everyone practically. So there's a potential risk in that. And I think with Nathaniel, granted, he got his own couple, not like couple, his guy friend. I don't know if they're a couple, actually. Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I don't remember his name though. But yeah, Nathaniel, neither of them really have that big of connections to the main like squad, like the main like cast of characters, as opposed to Sabrina having connections to Chloe. So there isn't that inherent risk for Ladybug giving him a Miraculous, as his identity won't potentially be leaked through his friend. So there's that. So I think, but if the old Miraculous users will ultimately get their Miraculous back, I think those two characters, Nathaniel and Sabrina, will ultimately get the Miraculous, as opposed to the couples Ivan, Malen, Julika, and Rose, who, if granted, like I said, if the old Miraculous wearers don't get their Miraculous back, then I think ultimately those two couples would ultimately get the 4 subsequent Miraculous, because it would help develop their character and potentially bring them in, and as like, or potentially bring them to the level of main characters through development, which would be allowed to occur given they receive the Miraculous. So there's that over. I just need to get my subsequent reasoning. So there's that. Um, what else? Another thing I think is that there would be what is it? What I think is that there would be. I predicted this for season 3, and it didn't actually happen. In fact, the exact opposite happened. I'll say it. What I predicted is that there would be new forms and powers for Ladybug and Chat Noir. I predicted that for season 3, and they did not end up actually using them until the last episode, which they used. They didn't even use their freaking ice power. They only used their water power, and it was for like one scene. So I'm hoping they get new forms and powers as opposed to ice, as opposed to water and ice, maybe fire, if there's like some sort of like, I don't know, like Akuma that just heats up the surface of the earth or something, or heats up the atmosphere or something, and it becomes like unbearably hot, and they need like a fire, like, or heat based power or like form to deal with that, or maybe even like in air form if they ultimately have to fight in like space or something, or like in the vacuum of space, or potentially in like, I don't know, in like an environment where there's no breathable air, some kind. Those are just examples or ideas. But I hope they get new forms and powers, because they introduced that during season 2, and it seemed like they would like improve that with season 3, but ultimately never happened. So that's one thing that a prediction I made before, which I hope happens for season 4. Now, moving on. This is a more interesting prediction. I predict that Hawkmoth will focus more on Lila over Chloe. However, I think this is also a logical prediction, as because the alternative is he still focuses on Chloe, but that likely won't yield anything, as I'm not sure Marinette as Ladybug will give her Miraculous anytime soon. First, given that Gabriel well knows her identity, but second, because she willingly fought with Hawkmoth, so that's likely out of the, and also because she basically hates Ladybug now, so that's out of the picture. So Hawkmoth will probably recognize that, and I think he'll focus more on Lila. And what I mean is that he himself as Hawkmoth will focus more on Lila. Not Gabriel focusing on Lila. He as Hawkmoth will focus on Lila. And that akumatizing her more often. And as we've seen people akumatized multiple times get stronger. So he would akumatize her more often and potentially use her in some of his plans, like he did during the season 2 finale. I think, as he never really, besides Chameleon, he never really ended up akumatizing her again during season 3. He used her as Gabriel, but he never really used her as Hawkmoth again. So that's what I think will happen during season 4. And like I said, the alternative is that he uses Chloe still, but I mean that's likely completely thrown out the window. So yeah, I 100% think he'll focus more on Lila. Now, next one. This one's also related to Hawkmoth. I think Scarlet Moth will make an appearance during season 4, but given that the season 4 finale is more subtle, it's one episode with, or what I think it will be, one episode with Natalie discovering Adrian's identity. I think you'll ultimately go through with it, kind of like season 3, where he ended up akumatizing everyone as Marinette was upset. I don't think he'll make a public appearance. I don't think he'll use, or I don't think he'll make a public appearance like he did during season 2, because that was partially for intimidation purposes. He'll stay back, but he'll ultimately end up akumatizing everyone as Scarlet Moth, and then Ladybug and Chat Noir would have to deal with that. That would potentially allow for them to give out the new. It would potentially allow them to give out new Miraculous to the people I discussed earlier, Ivan, Malen, Julika, and Rose, and it also potentially allow them to unlock new powers. if he also akumatizes potential season 4 villains as well. So I also think he'll use Mayora in that scenario, in that I also think, and basically that he would uh, ultimately end up using, in this scenario, he would use Natalie as Catalyst as opposed to Lila, which I predicted in the season 5 finale. He would use Natalie, who would allow him to become Scarlet Moth, and then he would ultimately akumatize everyone. But I guess she probably has to be acting as Catalyst in order for that to happen. But what happens is if she transforms into Mayora, Hawkmoth gives her the power of Catalyst as Mayora. She could potentially power him up, and then it would essentially, like the season 5 finale, in that Hawkmoth would akumatize everyone and give them all sentient monsters. He could potentially akumatize everyone, you as Scarlet Moth, as he gave Mayora the power to, make him Scarlet Moth. But Mayora would still have her in like regular powers as Mayora, so she could still be acting. Granted, I don't think it'll be like Scarlet Moth slash Mayora as two separate characters, as that's what I think will happen for the season 5 finale. It won't lead. I don't think this Scarlet Moth will lead to a scenario where everyone would get akumatized and have a sentient monster, because that's what I think will happen for the season 5 finale. So there's that out of the way. Obviously, the alternative, which I need to recognize, is that Scarlet Moth never appears again. But I think, given he had one appearance during season 3, it's logical that he makes another appearance during season 4. So we'll see. There's that. I'm flipping the page right now. I'm nearly done with the season 4 predictions. Now, this is the interesting one. This prediction is the one that could either be... I would feel real smart if this prediction was right. But if this prediction is wrong, then I guess it's basically the most offhand prediction. Kind of like how me predicting the Miraculous, the Guardian of the Miraculous would phase out, Master Fu would phase out. It would kind of be like that prediction, where if it's right, I would feel really smart. But yeah, this next prediction, it's definitely also the most interesting one. It's that Nellie's condition doesn't improve despite using the Peacock Miraculous, because obviously the Peacock Miraculous got fixed, and obviously Hawkmoth, Gabriel has plans for her, and even if he doesn't, Natalie would still probably use it on her own intuition. But I don't think, even though it's quite a high possibility, in fact, probably the opposite will happen, what was most likely is that her condition will improve. But what I predict is that it doesn't improve despite using it. Like, having the Peacock Miraculous fixed, it doesn't seem like it would fix her condition, or the Miraculous doesn't have innate power of, if someone is permanently damaged by the Miraculous, having the Miraculous fixed, it doesn't seem like it would help improve that, as the Miraculous have no real innate healing powers. And besides, her continually using it, constantly using it, it would be a lot of pressure on her, as like on her physical body, on top of it already having been damaged by the Miraculous. So I don't think there will be cause for the fixed Miraculous to improve her condition. And that's partially what I think will allow 2 developments in the season 4 finale, during season 5 and the season 5 finale. And it will ultimately lead to the event that would happen, which would allow Gabriel to care for and love Natalie like he did with Emily, and allow their ship to sail. I think this is what needs to happen, and I think it's what will happen. Well, not necessarily. It's what I want to happen. Granted, obviously, the alternative and what's much more likely is that it ultimately will end up fixing her condition, which is what I really don't want to happen. I really want her condition to, and I don't say that as like malice against her character, but I hope her, anyway, so 100% what I want to happen, not necessarily what's likely, but what I predict or what I want to happen is that Natalie's condition doesn't improve despite using the Peacock Miraculous, as there's no real reason, and that would allow for more development for her character. Now, anyway, next event. This is actually something I predicted for season 3 but never happened. This one isn't that important though, as the Ladybug Chat Noir getting new powers one. This is just a scene where Natalie visits the sanctuary and talks with herself as a melee. That would be an interesting scene and could allow for some potential character development, because that's one thing that we haven't seen happen yet. in one thing that's one interaction that I do want to happen that I could think lead to development. And then if Gabriel catches her or whatnot, or whether she does it on her own intuition, as she knows, as we know, she knows where Gabriel's like lair is, as she has been there. So yeah, it's just something that I really hope happens. It's a scene I really want to happen. The alternative is just it not happening, but it's something I really think has a lot of potential and something I really want to see happen. So yeah, 100%. I really hope, I really think, I predict that'll happen during season 4. So yeah. All right, so this is another kind of prediction out of left field where I think I have a logical explanation for it as I talked earlier about it, but I think this is an R1 kind of like Natalie's condition not improving, which likely won't happen. But this one is that Gabriel ditches Lila for Adrian's favor. Now, what I mean by this is that Gabriel as himself, not as Hawkmoth. So Gabriel as himself, how he himself had interactions with Lila in season 3. I think he'll ultimately leave her. There may be an interaction early on where he says something like, "This isn't working out. I can't work with you anymore." So it would be something along those lines. Basically, him ditching her, like leaving her, like no longer using her. And what I mean by for Adrian's favor, in that Gabriel would get some favoritism points with Adrian, and he doesn't. The thing is, Gabriel's obviously sheltered and protected. He's sheltering and, or well, he himself is viewing it as protecting Adrian, but in reality, he's sheltering Adrian. The thing is, Adrian doesn't like Lila, and if Adrian makes that apparent, Gabriel, by continuing to use Lila, he isn't necessarily sheltering Adrian. He would more so see her as a danger to Adrian, as Adrian himself doesn't like Lila. It's not necessarily like keeping Adrian from his friends because he is alone, and keeping him alone as he sees them as bad influences. Because Adrian, he doesn't talk down on his friends. It would be more so like Gabriel is doing that innately, sheltering him, keeping him from meeting our people. But if Adrian expresses specific distaste for someone like Lila, that could allow Gabriel's fatherly instincts to step in and cut off Lila, in that he would potentially see her as a danger and a threat to his son, given that his son doesn't like him, as his son rarely like, what would you call it, proclaims his dislike for other people. And that would also win Adrian favor, and it would ultimately allow them to become closer together as they've the events the what would you call it? It's, I won't even call them events, instances where Adrian and Gabriel have some form of development. There are small instances in each episode, scattered throughout season 1 and 2 and 3. But this will be a big one. And what I'm going to say is this, coupled with Natalie's condition not improving, would soften Gabriel, and it would potentially allow for more future development. As we'll see what happens, but as it will allow Gabriel to be more vulnerable, he won't have that iron grip over not only Adrian but also himself, as that would ultimately allow him to become more vulnerable and soft, and would allow for potential future development. But yeah, with that out of the way, this is the last prediction for season 4, or like in-season events during season 4. I think, and I'm not just saying that to like bandwagon, but I think there will be less Luca and Kagami, and more Marinette Adrian. This doesn't even necessarily have to be like love scenes or like whatnot, or them like confessing their feelings to each other, them having romantic moments. Just like in general, Luca spending less time, or Marinette spending less time with Luca, because it would be that way around, and then Kagami spending less time with Adrian, and it would be ultimately that way around. And because I think this would ultimately set the stage. Something like this would set the stage for, because I think Chat Blanc is a total lie. I think if one of the two characters confess to each other, or even potentially figure out their identity, I don't think they love each other like that. In a sense, they may have earlier, but Luca and Kagami have thrown them off, so I don't think they like each other like that anymore. I think more development would need to take place in order for them to reach the point they were at earlier and how they felt for each other. So, and yeah, I think that would ultimately, first, that would start off with less interactions with Luca and Marinette and Kagami and Adrian. Potentially interactions with Luca and Kagami, in that they could potentially start to talk about their troubles with Marinette and Adrian, as they both subsequently love them. But yeah, more potential scenes with that, but also just Adrian and Marinette spending time with each other. Not even necessarily like romantically, not even like a confessing, just spending more time with each other. Just like doing normal things. Like getting acquainted with each other as they once were. As they rarely did spend time together in season 3. So there's that, and that's anyway, with that, that's the last prediction I have for the for what will happen in season during season 4. So everything I just said, those are the predictions I have for season 4. I already went over the season 4 finale predictions earlier. Like I don't even know how earlier it was, but as the season 4 and 5 finale predictions, given we can make a logical step from the past season into the next season's finale, we have to get those out of the way. So I already got them done earlier in this video. So there's out of the way. Now the very last part of this video is the season 5 predictions. I'm not sure how long this will take. It's already been an hour and 15. This could take upwards of an hour 45, I think. But I mean, yeah, this is a long video. I might split it into 2. We'll see. But I mean, yeah, this is the big one. This is the big one. This is the big video. Now, all right. Season 5 predictions in season. So this is coming off all of my predictions that happened during season 4. The season 4 finale happening or the main event during the season 4 finale being Natalie discovers Adrian's identity as Chat Noir. Those events need to happen in order for these events to take place, or these events during the timeline of season 5 to take place, or so that these can take place as events during the season of, or during the timeline of season 5. God, I'm losing my words, but that's how I know it's getting long. But yeah, so this actually is a lot more, but rather than these being specific events, they're more so developmentative events in order to make it so that the season 5 finale can take place. Because a lot happens from I think a lot will happen from the season 4 finale if it goes like I think it will, or if the major event that I hope to take place will happen. A lot needs to happen from that in order to end the show at the end of season 5. So this is more so like a developmental timeline as opposed to specific events. This is also kind of how I'll also give my season 3 what I think should have happened videos. It'll be more developmentative timelines as opposed to specific events, like as were my season 3 predictions. But yeah, that's just what I gotta say. Like these need to happen in order as opposed to what I said during the season 4 predictions, which are more so just things that I think will happen, or just that I wish will happen during season 4 that I think will happen, as opposed to these events for season 5 being a necessity to happen in order for the finale to be able to take place. So, all right, let's get into it. Let's power through this. All right, last bit. Well, not really, because this should be long. But all right, so like I mentioned, how season 4 picks up directly after season 3. I think the season 5 will pick up sometime after season 4, or most likely it can pick up sometime after season 4, kind of like season 3, how it kind of picked up sometime after season 2. It wasn't directly after. In fact, for season 5, it's better that it picks up sometime after season 4, because the reason why I say that is because in thinking about Natalie's condition, the longer it takes place after, the more time her condition has to set, which is a major part of what I'm predicting will happen for season 5, and which will allow for the possibility of the season 5, or which will allow for the events that will take place to let the season 5 finale happen. So it's actually better that picks up sometime after season 4. So, all right, there's that. Now the first, I actually said it. It can only pick up sometime after season 4 if Natalie doesn't tell Gabriel about Adrian's secret identity, which is what I predicted the season 4 finale will be. But ultimately, she can't tell him, because that would basically put an end to the show, as Gabriel would effectively have Adrian's Miraculous. So that can't happen for that reason. So we know that won't happen. So anyway, the first thing I think will happen, I kind of talked about in the season 4, but is that Hawkmoth will ally with Lila. Because what I think is that in season 4, he'll mainly use Lila, like akumatize her again, and then, or maybe even akumatize her initially, planning on a later Scarlet Moth type scenario. I think that will happen more so in season 4, but in season 5, he'll sort of act like as how Gabriel did Delilah, where he will physically ally her as opposed to using her. It'll be more mutual. Now, what I have as a subpoint is that he'll reveal himself to Lila in the finale, and that would potentially need to happen in order to get her to act as Catalyst so that she can power him up, either just as Scarlet Moth and Mayora or with all the minor Miraculous of the Miracle Box, given how the season 5 finale plays out. So that's one thing I think will ultimately happen, which it will be more mutual, kind of how Gabriel and Lila where we're interacting, where it's more like a deal as opposed to simply him as Hawkmoth akumatizing her and using her. That's one thing I think will happen. I got that one out of the way because the rest of this is more interesting. Now, the next event that I think will happen, and this ties into picking up sometime after season 4 and Natalie's condition not improving in season 5, and what I think is that Natalie's condition will get critical, like to the point where she's bedridden, and not necessarily at this point near death. I think during the finale she should be near death, like the season 5 finale, where she should be basically dying. But I think at the beginning of season 5, where her condition gets critical, and what I mean by that is she can no longer really function, where she's bedridden 24/7. She can still eat, drink, but she can't really like function in terms of like exercise or exert herself at all. So that she's not necessarily like actually dying, but just immobile. And I think that will be, and I think that's what I really mean when I say her condition gets critical. And that as a sub point, I have can no longer act as Mayora, but basically critical being anything that prevents her from acting as Mayora. And I think that's the most logical event that'll prevent that, in that she gets like bedridden basically bedridden until she gets better, which won't happen because her ailment's caused by a damaged Miraculous. So, and it's what led to her mother's death. So, and I have specific bullet points. I'm not going to get into it all now, but through these bullet points, I'll sort of cover everything related to that. So the next bullet point is that I have in the next event not even event, just development that I think will have to take place, is that this is where Gabriel starts breaking down. That's literally what I've written down. Gabriel starts breaking down as Natalie's condition getting critical. I think that'll lead to that. Is because, first off, he thought that by fixing the Peacock Miraculous and ultimately having Natalie use it, it'll ultimately repair her to before she started using the damaged Miraculous. Because we saw how quickly it took a toll on her. She only used the Peacock Miraculous like 4 or 5 times, and she's barely able to use it now. So him thinking that by her using the fixed Peacock Miraculous will ultimately restore her, will ultimately, reverse the damages caused by the Peacock Miraculous. As opposed to doing that, in him thinking that, but if the events I've said preceding happen, as opposed to helping her, it ultimately damages her more and basically moves her condition from somewhat of an inconvenience to a more critical condition where it prevents her from becoming Mayora. I think that would cause him to break down, as ultimately Natalie would ultimately start going through the process that Amelie did, which will ultimately end with her death, basically her dying. And I think that would be what would need to take place in order for him to break down. Now, besides that, what I have listed as a sub point is that he would accelerate his plans as Hawkmoth. So what I mean is that Hawkmoth currently, if you look at it from a a conflict perspective, he's more so fighting a war of attrition. Like, just akumatize as many people as he can, throw as many Akumas out there, throw as many akumatized villains at Ladybug and Chat in order to defeat them as possible. Granted, during the season 2 finale, and especially during season 3, he's more so switched into like domination style, where he basically defeats them in one swift strike, in one decisive battle. I think he would ultimately switch to an all or nothing type event in the near future, as he sees Natalie's condition getting critical, like reaching that critical point where she's no longer able to act as Mayor, and her condition is mirroring that of his late wife Amele's. So I think he would ultimately prepare for an all or nothing type scenario against Ladybug and Chat Noir as opposed to simply throwing in Akuma at them every once in a while. So there's that. Next, this is interesting, and this is where I think season 5 development will really start to take place. The next event I've listed down is that Adrian will confront Natalie over her condition. Now, we already know that Natalie's starting to suffer the, what do you call it? Natalie's already starting to suffer the same symptoms and ailments that, you probably heard that, but my apologies. But she's already experiencing the same illness and ailments in like conditions that Emele was experiencing, and that was revealed through Adrian. So if Natalie reaches the point where she gets critical in what I would call bedridden, like critical, that would be something Adrian would definitely confront Natalie over, as that would be a surefire confirmation as opposed to a suspicion that Natalie's going through the same thing her mother did. And not even necessarily that she's going, from Adrian's perspective, it would more so not even be necessarily like a thing that caused his mother's death. Because from Adrian's perspective, his mother's death just seemed like random chance, just like a some sort of illness. But having seen Natalie starting to go through the same thing, and ultimately reaching that point of no return where her condition gets critical, and it's definitely 100% the same thing that his mother went through, then that would be something I feel he would confront her about, ultimately when Gabriel's not around, if he's doing something. Now, as a sub-point here, because Adrian would ultimately be confrontational about Natalie, he would probably make the connection between his father and ultimately this sort of, not, I wouldn't even call it a condition, but this sort of, he would make the connection between his father in these events happening to people he's near, where basically they ultimately, their health deteriorates rapidly whenever, and starting from, what would you call it? It would be starting from a definitive point in time. Like for Natalie, it would be during Scarlet Moth. That would be the start of it. And Adrian would recognize that soon after Scarlet Moth, she would start to experience the symptoms, or the initial symptoms that his mother experienced. But ultimately, once she reaches that condition where it's critical, and it's 100% evident that she is definitely experiencing the same symptoms, and that he could probably remember when his mother, a definitive time when his mother started experiencing the symptoms, and ultimately hitting critical condition as well. That would be something I could see him making the connection between Gabriel and that. He wouldn't necessarily think that Gabriel's doing something to Natalie, but he would know that Gabriel has some part in it. And that would ultimately be what would get Natalie, and what would ultimately, because for her at this point, it's about, because obviously she can't play it off anymore at that point that she's critical in bed, and if she's in critical condition in bedridden, she can't play it off anymore like she could have when she was just had like a slight cough or was feeling dizzy. She can't play it off anymore. But ultimately, I don't think she could come up with a good enough excuse, or I'm not even sure she could come up with an excuse. Like she couldn't. I'm not sure she could come up with anything. And my sub point here is that Natalie potentially reveals she knows that Adrian is Chat Noir, because obviously in the season 4 finale, I think that is a logical step from the end of season 3. The season 4 finale being where Natalie figures out that Adrian, or learns that Adrian is Chat Noir. I think that's a logical step. And I think that's really the only thing, her reveal of knowing that he's Chat Noir, when it's just them two all alone, that would ultimately get Adrian to stop berating her, and ultimately have her reveal that Gabriel, or have her confirm that Gabriel is a part of it, or involved in her condition, as opposed to simply his suspicions. That would ultimately, because if she confirms that yes, it's Gabriel that is it's Gabriel that's causing this, that's caused this to your mother and caused this to me. That could lead Adrian to confront Gabriel, which would ultimately not be well and not end well. It's not what Natalie would want. So the only real thing that could curb that is her potentially switching the topic of conversation, and by her revealing that she knows he's Chat Noir, that would ultimately be really what I think would be the only thing that could ultimately switch the topic and prevent her from ultimately failing to come up with an excuse, which would lead him to be suspicious of his father anyway, or or Natalie revealing that it is his father that's causing this to happen to her and his mother, or that caused this to happen to her mother. So, yeah, there's that. All right, so now on the last page of the note card. Granted, there's more notes on this page, but yeah. So, also I said probably won't reveal Gabriel's Hawkmoth. I don't know why I put that. I don't think that's appropriate. I think all she would really do, because the thing is, I remember why. Because if she potentially reveals that she is Mayora and that it was the Miraculous that caused this, as there was a scene where they saw her sort of like exhausted. It was during the episode Ladybug, actually, where Mayora created a sentient monster that looked like Ladybug, and they saw her exhausted. She reveals that it was the Peacock Miraculous that caused that. That could potentially drive Adrian's suspicions away from his father for a brief period of time. But ultimately, then I think he would ultimately make the connection that if this happened to his mother too, then Gabriel is, or that in that they are both related to Gabriel, that Gabriel could potentially be Hawkmoth. So ultimately, it could be an option. It could be a alternative, as opposed to Natalie revealing she knows he's Chat Noir, saying just directly, yeah, this was a cause of the Peacock Miraculous, to avoid like Adrian, what would you call it? To avoid an Adrian confrontation with his father. But ultimately, Adrian would make that connection between Mayora and Hawkmoth, and subsequently Natalie and Gabriel. So ultimately, I don't think it'll happen. It'll likely be Natalie revealing that she knows Adrian is Chat Noir, as opposed to her revealing that Gabriel is Hawkmoth. I think that's a much more likely scenario, and it makes much more sense, as it would drive the topic of conversation away from her condition and potentially Gabriel to Adrian. So there's that. Yeah, moving away from that, the next topic is that Marinette and Adrian would spend more time together. I mentioned this at the end of season 4, but this time in development, this would be more romantic. This would be more there wouldn't be any confessions. It would be more romantic, it would be more meaningful, it would be more so like love, like platonic, whatever, like love based. It would be more meaningful, I would say, interactions, as opposed to just interaction for the interaction time, which is what I think will happen during season 4. These interactions will be more meaningful, because this would ultimately season 4 interactions would set the stage for these interactions to take place, and these interactions would set the stage for them to ultimately for their ship to sail. So the sub point I have is Adrian potentially revealing his home situation. That would be a meaningful interaction, because what that would show is that Adrian trusts Marinette enough, more than anyone else, in order to reveal this information. Is Adrian, obviously Natalie's condition is going to affect Adrian, so if Adrian isn't really performing as well in school, or he's not really acting as he was, or he's basically going through a depressive episode, and then Marinette catches on that and she asks him about it, and he potentially reveals that would be a meaningful interaction, and it would allow for Marinette to recognize what Adrian's going through and care for him more, like adjusted for that, more tuned for that specific event happening, and ultimately Adrian being able to rely on Marinette more, not just as a friend, but as someone more than that. Not potentially lovers yet. That'll be the end, but yeah, that's ultimately what I think will happen. Also, I have another subpoint, probably won't reveal their secret identities. I don't know why I have that listed. Like I said, I think it would be during the developmental episode of this season 5 finale that they'll ultimately reveal each other's identities. But basically, in order for them to mutually discover their identities, and it wouldn't even necessarily be a reveal, more so as them discovering a quirk of each other that is apparent in Ladybug and Chat Noir, and them basically using that to, and basically them realizing from that quirk that ultimately they are the two superheroes of Paris. But ultimately, in order for them to reach that stage, they need They need the interactions solely for interactions in season 4 so that they spend more time together. Then in season 5, they need these meaningful interactions that are more romantic and like partner based, so that they can set the stage for ultimately discovering a quirk of each other's that will lead them to them discovering that they're subsequently Ladybug and Chat Noir. So there's that. Now this next event, this is the event that will have to happen if the for the battle episode of season 5 for the second option, in that it's Gabriel with all the minor Miraculous being powered up by Catalyst versus all the current Miraculous users and all the future Miraculous users. This is the event that would need to happen in order for that option, in order for that second in order for the second option or second for the second option of the God, what's the word? In order for the second I don't even know. Ignore that. So so I'm just gonna say it. Gabriel visits the Temple of the Miraculous. Now, I'm saying himself as Gabriel, not as Hawkmoth, because this sets the stage for, obviously, like I said, him getting all the Miraculous from a Miracle Box, him being powered up by Catalyst, and that I can't think of the word. I'm losing my memory. But in order for the second, God, that's gonna annoy me so much. In order for the I'm not even gonna go. But basically, Gabriel visiting the Temple of the Miraculous as himself. Now, in order for this to happen, the temple has already been publicized, but they would first need to allow people in. That would be what needs to happen first, as like tours or whatever. Because first off, we know there are multiple Miracle Boxes. This has been said by Master Fu himself. Granted, what it means for Kwamis, because if there's only supposed to be one of each Kwami, not only that, also if the Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculous are so special, that there would be more than them, that doesn't really make sense. It makes more sense that there's only one Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculous, but that the rest of the Miracle Boxes still have the lesser Miraculous, and that's ultimately he would take that, and then ultimately that's how he'd be able to wield all of the minor Miraculouses during the second. God, I still can't think the word. That's so dumb. I hate it. Or during like the other, I'm that's gonna annoy me forever. But anyway, so basically the second option for the season 5 finale during the battle episode being where he fights the future Miraculous user as well. That's what would need to happen. He'll need the visit of the Temple of the Miraculous in order to make that happen. So if he somehow gets there, actually these subsequent bullet points or more so what will events that will take place if he gets there now. All right. The subsequent event that will happen is he'll take a Miracle Box as Hawkmoth. Obviously, they're not just going to leave their Miracle Boxes out, so he'll need to transform to Hawkmoth and then basically infiltrate it. He'll scope it out as Gabriel and then re-infiltrate it as Hawkmoth, end up taking a Miracle Box, a spare one they have with the Miraculous inside, and ultimately fleeing. Now, I don't think he'll do this with Mayora, because obviously Natalie at this point is fully bedridden, I think, by season 5. Season 4, she'll act as Mayora, but her condition will remain, but I think by season 5, she'll be bedridden. So it'll be him himself. And that Natalie being bedridden will drive him to do this, because this is an extreme risk. Him going out of his way to steal Miraculous Box, where he could potentially get caught and potentially defeated by the whole Order of the Miraculous at their temple, nonetheless. So although it doesn't seem like an event, something you would normally do, Natalie being bedridden will ultimately drive him to happen, and drive him to do this. And this would be ultimately where he reflects on Natalie and potentially whether what he was doing was worth it, in his potential feelings for Natalie as he's losing her. This would ultimately be where that takes place as he's doing this, I think. There's that, and that's the event. Like the next bullet point I has is, again, only if he ends up finding the future superheroes. That's the event that needs to happen in order for Hawkmoth to fight the superheroes from the future timeline as well. this is a definitive event that needs to happen. And I hope to God they don't use the Temple of the Miraculous or like the Order of the Miraculous in any other way, simply because it's way too late to be introducing them. It's a giant elephant in the room right now, which I'll discuss that more during my season 3 videos. This is solely for season 5. But again, and if he doesn't, then this event doesn't need to happen at all. But in order for him to fight off the future miraculous users, if you're going to bring back the future timeline in during season 5, then they might as well bring the temple in that they would potentially contrast each other, and that they each allow for each subsequent team, Hawkmoth's team being himself, Mayor, Lila, Ladybug's team being her and all her superheroes, they would each act as subsequent, or there would be subsequent events or like actions that would be taken to boost the power of their respective teams. So there's that. Yeah, done with that. Get that out of the way. Next bullet point is this would be what would happen if that doesn't happen, or this would be what would take place if that doesn't happen. Is that would be an episode or two that would not need to take place. What he says that if not, Gabriel spends more time with Adrian and Natalie, and more so with Natalie as she's bedridden, because what ultimately her condition in season 4 will remain stagnant, but in that it will remain stagnant from the end of season 3. But if season 5 takes place sometime after season 4, then Natalie could start bedridden, but ultimately as her condition is reached that point, it would subsequently get worse throughout the season. So she would go from just being bedridden to ultimately needing like life support. That's the level I'm thinking of. And ultimately, as Natalie transitions from just solely being bedridden to ultimately needing like full life support, Gabriel would spend more time with her, as he's not sure how much time he has left with her. Granted, this is assuming he doesn't take the miracle box, and this could potentially still happen if he takes the miracle box, but this is just what would happen if, in order as filler for that, if that wasn't what happened. If he was solely fighting the present day miraculous warriors, this is what would likely happen. He would have more developmental time with Adrian and Natalie, as he would not have to go out of his way to take a miracle box from the Temple of the Miraculous. So yeah, spending more time with Natalie. What I mean by this is that it would be meaningful time. It wouldn't necessarily be simply him just like giving orders to Natalie, or him just standing by Natalie as they discuss like, or as they whatever talk about Adrian, life, his work, whatever. It would be meaningful discussion. And what I mean by that is the first thing I think would happen, or one of the topics that obviously this is talking about Natalie, but one of the topics I think you could talk about is ultimately, like I said, whether him doing all of this was worth it or not. And I mentioned that he would likely think about that during when he is taking the miracle box from the Temple of the Miraculous, as opposed to him thinking about that through like an internal monologue. He would voice that to Natalie. Hopefully at this point she would still likely be conscious and have her voice, but ultimately she may, like, it could be in stages. Like, she starts slowly being bedridden, and ultimately by the end she's unconscious and on full life support. But if she's still conscious and able to interact with Gabriel somehow through like a breathing mask or tube or whatever, if she's like, if her organs are basically, if her body's going through like failure or whatnot, like ultimately Gabriel would still probably have a meaningful interaction with her, even if she was unconscious. But I think it would make more sense for her to be on like the cusp of consciousness, or the cusp of unconsciousness. That's what I meant. Or basically, she would be at the lowest possible point in where she could have a meaningful conversation with Gabriel. That's what would allow for more development. So him saying that whether everything he did was worth it or not, because if Natalie's just going to suffer the same fate as in Melee, it ultimately wasn't worth it, as that's a net loss. And Gabriel and Adrian ultimately lose someone close to them as well. Natalie could, I'm not even going to go over how Natalie responded, but that would simply be topics he would talk about with Natalie, because it won't likely be Gabriel constantly spending time with Natalie. It'll just be a few scenes as Natalie is condition is getting worse, and basically she's slowly needing to be shifted to life support, and ultimately when she loses consciousness. But before she loses consciousness, is she still conscious and able to have a meaningful conversation with Gabriel? Ultimately, that would be the main topic, whether it was worth it. But then the next topic is, this one I actually have as a sub point, it would be him potentially changing his wish for Natalie. As we know that, like I said, one of the first events of the season would be as Natalie's condition reaches a critical point where she's bedridden, Gabriel would ultimately accelerate his plans as Hawkmoth, focus in on an all-out move in order to defeat Ladybug and Chat Noir, as so he can do it in time before Natalie ultimately passes. And potentially, if he does this, he could potentially change his wish in order to reverse the effects on Natalie. Granted, this could likely just place the effects on himself. However, if he's able to curb that, that could potentially be what his wish changes to, because he could potentially plan in order to use, if there really are multiple Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculouses, he could potentially use the Ladybug and Black Cat Miraculous of a Miracle Box from the temple if he plans on making another wish. But I think he could potentially reprioritize his wish. He could, even though he loves a melee, him seeing Natalie through what she's going through could potentially cause him to change his wish and prioritize her over him bringing back a melee. He'd rather prioritize making Natalie all right as opposed to bringing a melee back. But yeah, those would be the two meaningful conversations he could have with Natalie, whether it was all worth it, and then him potentially changing his wish if he succeeds in his all-out move against Ladybug and Chat Noir, which he's had the whole season to plan. This would be nearing the end of the season, so yeah. In order for his interactions with Adrian, what I said was he probably won't reveal his identity to Adrian, and I mean, because we saw he was going to go through with revealing his identity to Adrian during Felix, but it likely wouldn't be wise for him to reveal to Adrian as what is happening with Natalie. Granted, he could potentially, the alternative is him revealing it and then hoping Adrian would help him, but likely he would not see it that way, and he'd rather not put that extra stress on Adrian, especially since ultimately that would implicate Gabriel as the one who has caused this to, or who has done this to Natalie. Granted, I think it would be a more likely possibility if Natalie reveals to Gabriel that Adrian is Chat Noir. I think he'd be more likely to reveal himself as Hawkmoth to Adrian as opposed to going as he did in Chat Blanc, where basically as soon as it's revealed that Adrian is Chat Noir, he basically immediately moves against Adrian, like as Hawkmoth, declaring that the Miraculous are his. But given Natalie in her condition, if she reveals that Adrian is Chat Noir, I think Gabriel, he would rather go to Adrian in person, reveal himself as Hawkmoth, and try and make amends. Basically say that he originally intended to use the wish to bring back a melee, but now he wants to use it to restore Natalie. I think that would be the only scenario in where he would reveal his identity, but even still, I likely don't think that would happen, is that would ultimately take the focus away from Natalie and put it on Gabriel and Adrian, and there's still more time for Natalie's condition to worsen. This is right as this is when she's at her lowest point, still being able to have a meaningful conversation. So there's that. I do think if Natalie's condition gets critical, there will be a lot more development with her, Gabriel, and Adrian subsequently all together. She's kind of the force. She's a driving force really holding them together, essentially. So there's that. Next one, this is the second to last one. This would obviously take place after Gabriel spending more time with Adrian and Natalie. Granted, I think this would happen regardless, as I think Gabriel would spend more time with Adrian and Natalie. I think that would be more so what would happen if Gabriel didn't need to visit the Temple of the Miraculous to fight the future Miraculous Wars. I think that this meanwhile, Adrian confronting Natalie once more, I think it would be something that would happen regardless. And he would confront her as soon as she reached critical condition, like as soon as she got bedridden. But then he would also confront her again right before she reaches like the point of no return and that she can no longer have a meaningful conversation, and that basically right before she slips into unconsciousness and basically being held up by life support. So he would have the first and last conversation of her in critical condition, from her just solely being bedridden versus her being versus her last moments being, or her last real meaningful conversation while being conscious before she ultimately slips into unconsciousness. Because I do think if she is unconscious during the entirety of the season finale, that will raise the stakes and it'll ultimately focus, and that will ultimately allow for more development on really everyone's, on mainly Gabriel and Hawkmoth, or Gabriel as not even necessarily Gabriel is either Hawkmoth or himself. It would allow more development for him if Natalie did go unconscious before the finale. So yeah, so obviously, or well, actually, hold on. It was actually extended. I said that I wrote down that Adrian may confront Natalie once more after spending time with Gabriel, and this is after spending time with Gabriel. So if Adrian has another, if Adrian spends time with Gabriel like he did, if Gabriel opens up more to Adrian as Natalie's condition worsens, at this point Adrian would 100% know that people people who got close to Gabriel, like his wife or Natalie, somehow their relation to Gabriel caused this condition. And ultimately, as Gabriel's attitude changes because of it, that would be the confirmation for Adrian. If Gabriel spends more time with Adrian due to Natalie's worsening condition, not even necessarily Adrian thinking it'll happen to him, but more so simply Gabriel's change in attitude will be the confirmation factor, and that's what will allow Adrian to go to Natalie one more time. Now, the events that I have specifically happen, this is where development will take place. This is where what I said potentially what happened earlier would happen. Now I think this is like this is the last meaningful conversation Natalie has before she slips into unconsciousness, or this is why I'm predicting will be. So now the first supplement I have, which is what I think the first thing will happen, is that Natalie will reveal she was Mayora. Now this especially, or I guess the thing is, if Natalie has some sort of, what would you call it? If Natalie has some sort of conversation with Gabriel where she reveals that Adrian is Chat Noir, this would make much more sense. So like, let's say she talked with Gabriel before this, and ultimately, like I said, where Gabriel spends more time with Adrian and Natalie. If she reveals that Adrian is Chat Noir to Gabriel, and Gabriel doesn't immediately act on it, let's say Gabriel just goes back to working, but rather than work, he ultimately reflects. Because rather than immediately act on it, he would probably spend more time reflecting. And this would allow for Adrian time to have one last interaction with her as her last meaningful conversation. And this would allow for Natalie to reveal she's Mayora, as she doesn't feel guilty in revealing to one side or the other, as she already revealed to Gabriel that Adrian was Chat Noir. So she would only feel it's fair. So yeah, she would reveal she's Mayora, and she would also likely reveal that Gabriel is Hawkmoth. I think that would be like in her last meaningful conversation. I think she would likely there would be nothing left. She would bring nothing, or at least from her perspective, she would be bringing nothing to her grave, as she revealed that Adrian was Chat Noir to Gabriel, which she learned through the season 4 finale, and she ultimately revealed to Adrian that she's not only Mayora, and it was the Miraculous that caused this to her, and that would explain her being exhausted in Ladybug, but she would also reveal that Gabriel is Hawkmoth. So basically, it would be completely transparent. There would be no more secrets, no more hiding things from each other. It would be entirely just them. She would have revealed everything she's got. And then obviously, I don't think Adrian would immediately confront Gabriel. I think he would ultimately have a time of reflecting as well. Whether it be, he could confront Gabriel out of rage, but I think he would have time reflecting more so as not necessarily thinking about like Gabriel, he wouldn't necessarily think about like Natalie and then Gabriel, like, as himself. He would more so think about Hawkmoth's actions. Like, he would think about, like, how he fought his father during Scottmoth, how he fought his father during the Ladybug episode, and ultimately the season 3 finale. He would think about his interactions with Hawkmoth, likely more than anything else, and he'd have time to reflect on that. And ultimately, if this were to happen, if either of them confronted each other, that would force the end of the episode. So from this point on is where I think Hawkmoth would make preparations to set up for the development episode of the finale. This would be like the episode right before the finale. Gabriel would make preparations to set up for the development episode of the season finale. Like, he would potentially, before Adrian could confront him, he would leave his house. He would transform into Hawkmoth, leave his house, and then ultimately confront Lila, which would prevent Adrian from being able to confront Gabriel and force an end to the show. And then it would ultimately allow for the season finale to happen, as opposed to a quiet ending to the show and him confronting Gabriel and settling their differences. It would end in the battle and ultimately have a resolution episode after that. Because I really do think if Adrian confronted Gabriel, they would settle their differences. But by Gabriel confronting Lila as Hawkmoth, that prevents Adrian from confronting Gabriel and sets motions for the season 5 finale. So there's that. That's the last thing I wanted to. Well, no, there's one more, and that is there's obviously one more thing, and that is if they haven't already, Marinette and Adrian reveal their identities. Now, what this means is potentially even earlier in the episode. It doesn't even necessarily need to be after Natalie spilling the beans to Gabriel about Adrian and Adrian about herself and Gabriel. It could potentially happen before. Like, if Adrian, during the season, let's say the whole season is spent slowly bringing Adrian and Marinette close together, slowly developing their relationship and their characters, as opposed to simply season 4 where it'll be surface level interactions, where season 5 is really focused on their development. Ultimately, I think if they conclude that season with sort of their mutual first off, if they have sort of a mutual discovering of each other's identities through their simple quirks interacting with each other, I think that's very likely. I think that's likely. If they spend enough time, they would recognize each other's quirks. And it wouldn't even necessarily be something where they would see each other physically transform and detransform. They would simply connect the dots themselves, as they would recognize that, oh, he or she, Adrian would recognize that Marinette is extremely similar to Ladybug, and then pick up on a quirk of hers that Ladybug has, and he would make the connection there. It'd be sort of like a revelation, and vice versa for Marinette. She would realize that Adrian is somewhat, as she gets to know Adrian more, that Adrian is similar to Chat Noir, and ultimately a quirk. If she picks up on a quirk of his that is evident in Chat Noir, and she has a similar revelation, if it's a mutual discovery, then ultimately that would be not only best for the story in that no one but them would know, but also that would allow for the most development for their character. And ultimately, granted, that could happen potentially before the developmental episode for the season 5 finale, but ultimately near the end of the season, they will have to figure out each other's identity, and I think that will be the most likely, not even necessarily the most likely, but that would be the best way for it to happen, and it would lead for the most development for their character. It would essentially be the most positive way for them to discover their identities. So, yeah. I also have as a bullet point, or a sub point, potentially after a confession, just completely scrap that, because ultimately the confession will be during the resolution for the season 5 finale. It would be in the 3rd episode of the season 5 finale, which would be the resolution part, and ultimately that's when they would have their confession, and that's when they would declare their love for each other, as the season 5 finale focused on them simply being good friends, knowing each other, to reaching that point. And ultimately, the best way, and really the only way, in order for them to both learn of each other's identities and to both love each other, as contrary to Chat Blanc, they would need to mutually discover their identities through their quirks, and ultimately, and that's what would lead to them to make amends, to basically reflect over them not necessarily seeing the other as separate entity between their civilian and their superhero persona, but as the same person. That's what I think will allow the easiest transition for that, and ultimately, which will subsequently lead to like their declarations of love and their ultimate. It will ultimately lead for their ship to sail. So, I mean, that's all I've got. That was a long one, uh, nearly 2 hours. Actually, exactly, but still take forever to edit and upload. So, I'll see what I can do. But yeah, so I'm not gonna go through a whole back brief, but yeah, this if you managed to make it this far, honestly, you probably just skipped to the end and are listening to this now. But this was the this was the season 4 and 5 predictions video. The reason why it was long is because I had to subsequently predict the finale for each season, and then ultimately events that would happen within each season, and then development more specifically within season 5 that would ultimately have to happen in order for the finale to take place. One last bit, I do think Natalie being unconscious during I just came up with that on the spot. Natalie being unconscious during the season 5 finale and her last meaningful conversation with Adrian. I think that would be the if Hawkmoth let's say comes back to Natalie at some point during the development stage of or the development episode of the season 5 finale and realizes that Natalie is like unconscious. She's basically clinging on to life through life support. That's what I think will ultimately push him over the edge and realize how much he cared for her and how he subsequently had feelings and loved her. He just didn't notice it or he didn't realize it at the time because oftentimes you don't know what you have until you lose it. And I think that's really what would need to happen in order for Gabriel to really in order for Gabriel and Natalie to end up together, and that ultimately his defeat would allow for the superheroes to help him, and ultimately reverse the effects of the damage on Natalie. Is we would have the entirety of everyone who has wielded a Miraculous in the present and future working towards that. I think they would be able to make it happen, and they would ultimately reverse the effects, bring her back to consciousness, and ultimately nurse her back to health. And that's ultimately what will allow for the Gabe Nath ship to sail as well. Is Gabriel? He would have genuinely mourned while Natalie was slowly dying, and he would ultimately realize how much he truly loved her and cared for her, and she the same, and ultimately it would be a good end to the show. And it would also fulfill the requirements for a future Hawkmoth, in that Lila is likely to future Hawkmoth, in that her character arc, although seems completed, effectively could allow for some future conflict, and that the only way to ensure that she doesn't like do anything sinister in the future is to just like execute her, but that's obviously not going to happen. But what would you call it? Basically not like not even excommunicating her, but basically just like uh it's like X something, I can't think of the word, but if she's just like if she's basically just excluded, or she's like I don't even know, that's gonna bother me so much. Basically if she's simply like basically if she leaves Paris indefinitely, which would seem like a punishment that would happen if at the end of the season 5 finale, given Hawkmoth loses, that could potentially that could provide an explanation for her becoming the future Hawkmoth, and that her character arc isn't fully concluded. She still has a hatred for pretty much not just Ladybug and Chat Noir, but all Miraculous users, and that would potentially allow her to, if she potentially gains access to a butterfly Miraculous, she could potentially become a more dangerous Hawkmoth, as her goal would specifically be the death of all Miraculous users, as opposed to simply using the wish to save his wife like Gabriel did. But yeah, I'm ending it here. Sorry I've been long enough. So, and I gave away and I said all my predictions, so just leaving everything out there. I might as well. So yeah, I mean that was it for the season 4-5 predictions video. So I'm gonna re-go through this video once the seasons happen, and it probably will be entirely different. So, but that's just life. So yep, guess that's it for today. Tomorrow it is then.